This just can't happen if you want to be a playoff team in the Western Conference. You can't lose to the Detroit Pistons at home in the Western Conference. Like, that's just not going to cut it. The Kings have fallen out of the top six because they lost at home to a Detroit Pistons team without Cade Cunningham, without Bojan Bogdanovic. They traded Monte Morris and Kevin Knox, so they were without them. And you come in and you don't play with the right energy, the most predictable game of all time, and you fox around and you find out, because that's what De'Aaron did. When you don't come in and play hard on every possession and actually, you don't take a team seriously, that's what's going to happen. And the Kings have done that a lot this season. And I'm just like every game that we come into against a team like the Pistons, especially at home, like we lost to the Hornets at home, who were undermanned, and we lost to the Trailblazers, and we keep losing to these bad teams because the team just doesn't take them seriously, and it starts with De'Aaron Fox. He just doesn't come out locked in against these teams. Like, he was better defensively in this game than offensively, but you can't have 12 points in this type of game. Like, that can't happen. De'Aaron Fox and this Kings team as a whole has been playing these games against bad teams like they're a top seed. And they're not. They're not a top seed. And I don't think really any trade is going to change that. We have the trade deadline tomorrow, so people will be like, let's make a trade. Like, obviously we can get better through some trades, but it's a mentality thing. It's just a mentality thing, and it starts with De'Aaron Fox. When you look at Sabonis, that dude is playing hard on literally every possession. Like, he does not give up on any play, and he is going hard after everything on both ends. And it's just not the same with Fox. And I just think that trickles down to the rest of the team. You had a 5-2 road trip, like, played so well, and you come home and you get a gift. You get a gift all wrapped up nicely, getting to play the Detroit Pistons as your first game back. Like, it's a tiring road trip. You get to come back and you get a free win if you just take it seriously. I don't care how many threes the Pistons hit, 17 out of 31. I don't care how many of those were contested, like a Mike Muscala step back or an Alec Burks draining a three in a guy's face. Like, you still shouldn't lose this game. And if the Kings end up in the play-in and they end up losing in the play-in this season, it's going to be because of games like this. Like, this is a huge deal. This, Hornets, Trailblazers, even had a tight game against the Spurs. We went to overtime against the Trailblazers another time. We're just always in tight games with these bad teams. And if another team decides to knock down a bunch of shots in the fourth quarter, then you're screwed. And the Kings, like, they made their big run in the third quarter after going down 15. They were leading by 2 at the end of the third quarter. So going into the fourth quarter, you have all the momentum in the world. Sabonis just hit a buzzer-beating 3 to take the lead for the first time in a while. And then what do the Kings do? They come out in the fourth quarter, and they just let Jaden Ivey go straight to the rim. And there's just 3 straight possessions of wide open layup, wide open layup, wide open 3. Just let the Pistons right back into the game. You had all the momentum. And this team, time after time after time, does not have the killer instinct. It's not about the talent. It's about the mentality for this team. 70 points in the first half for the Pistons, 63 in the second half. Both halves just awful defensively. The Kings made their big run in the third quarter with De'Aaron Fox off the floor. And then Fox came back onto the floor in the fourth, and the Pistons retook the lead. And it's like, it's not a coincidence. De'Aaron he couldn't get anything to go. He wasn't getting to the rim as much as he should have. And then finally in the fourth, it was too late, but he finally got to the rim easily and actually scored. But the offense was just so stagnant. Like, 21 points is what they scored in the fourth quarter. They couldn't get anything in the half court at all. Fox was just missing everything inside. The offense wasn't moving. And the only way they were scoring was in transition. A massive problem with the Kings offense was just not attacking the paint enough. There were way too many early shot clock threes. And the Kings, they shot okay from 3-point range in this game, but there were just way too many bad 3-point attempts. And those bad 3-point attempts, a lot of times, ended up in the Pistons running it right back the other way. The Detroit Pistons have zero rim protection. They're playing Jalen Duren at center for 37 minutes. And then they have Mike Muscala in there. Off the bench, it's Danilo Gallinari. That's their big guy off the bench. Like, they have no rim protection, no defense inside. Duren is not a good defensive center. And when the Kings did attack, they usually scored pretty easily. When Monk would just take a screen, go downhill, the Pistons had zero idea how to defend that. Where Monk has been struggling recently has been teams taking away the pocket passes, and then he's gone to the mid-ranger, which he's been pretty good at. But the Pistons, they couldn't take away either. Like, the pocket pass was always there, and Monk was always wide open from the mid-range. When Harrison Barnes would get in the post, he could get right to the rim. When Sabonis would get in the post and the Pistons would throw numbers at him, he could just find an open man so easily. Every possession that resulted in a three-pointer before the Kings even tried attacking the paint was a horrible possession against this Pistons team. I thought the Kings were pretty bad offensively, and they still scored 120 points. I think this is one of those games where they should have been able to win it on either end. Like, if they showed up on offense, it shouldn't have mattered how their defense played. Or if they showed up on defense, it shouldn't have really mattered how their offense played. Like, you just have to show up on one end, and you probably win this game, but they didn't show up on either end. Keegan Murray, 20 minutes, 0 for 4 from the field, and he had 0 points and 4 fouls. There was a lot of questionable decisions from Mike Brown in this game, I'm not going to lie. Leaving Keegan out there with 3 fouls, baffling. He picked up his 4th foul in the second quarter. And then to not play Keegan down the stretch, I mean, it just, I don't get it. I was so confused. They played Davion out there with Fox and Monk. Lyles and Barnes kind of switched out, and then it was Sabonis. Like, that was the lineup down the stretch. I mean, with the Pistons just scoring at will, I don't understand why Keegan wasn't in the game. Like, who cares if he's having an off game offensively and he picked up a few fouls defensively? Like, he was still being a good defensive player despite his fouls. He was rebounding super well, got a steal, got a block. Like, okay, he airballed a 3. Like, who cares? Let him play through it. It was just so weird to me that they didn't have him out there for defense. I just cannot explain him playing only 20 minutes and just like never coming in down the stretch. And then having Kevin Huerter be the primary defender on Jaden Ivey for such large chunks of this game. I mean, there was like one possession where Huerter held his own, and then the rest, he's just like pressing up on Ivey on the perimeter and then gets blown by. Like, why? You let Jaden Ivey, obviously he was shooting really well from 3 and 5 for 7 from 3. That's not normal for him. But to let him go off for 37 points while just throwing Kevin Huerter at him the whole time, it's just baffling to me. Like, Fox, as much as he was just awful and looked so passive offensively, like, he was still getting after it defensively. He had defensive mistakes in the fourth quarter for sure, and there were some points where he was just like gambling for steals that he didn't need to go for, but he was still getting in the passing lanes. He was getting deflections. He had 3 steals. Like, he was still playing with effort defensively. And so why isn't he the one guarding Jaden Ivey? Or I would even rather put Keegan Murray on Jaden Ivey. I don't know. It was just so weird to me. And just the way the Kings were defending some of the Pistons. Why are you trying to like run Asar Thompson off the 3-point line? Why are you pressuring him so far up? It was those kind of mental decisions where it's just like the Kings just weren't locked in this one. It definitely wasn't the exact same script as the game in Detroit, because in Detroit, the Kings started off horribly, got down big early, and then came back. But I still feel like there were similarities, especially with the way they ended the second quarter. And then they obviously started the third quarter horribly. And that's kind of how they played at the start of the game in Detroit. And then they go on this big run to erase it super quickly, but then don't have that killer instinct and let the Pistons actually be in the game in the fourth. It was just like the exact same thing in that sense. But the Kings did start the game well. They were knocking down their threes. Herter hit 2 threes, and he was just very hot. I think the Kings as a whole hit their first 4 threes. They hit those first threes, and then they just started chucking from deep. And that's when things started going downhill. So Mike Brown called the timeout because the Pistons were scoring off those misses. And out of the timeout, they run a play. Domas gets the ball inside to Barnes for an easy dunk. And from there, the Kings were going to the paint, like Monk getting to the paint and 2 straight times hitting Domas for easy looks inside. And so they came out of that timeout, obviously, with a focus on getting to the paint. But they just weren't able to maintain that focus for the entire game. And the bench was much better at getting to the paint than the starting unit. And I mean, that has a lot to do with Malik Monk. And it just felt like even though it was a close game, the Kings were playing well enough in the first half. Like, it wasn't perfect. The defense obviously wasn't great, but it felt like they were playing well enough where they could get a lead going into halftime, and then they could come out with a little more focus, make some adjustments against what's working for the Pistons, and then kind of blow them out from there. Instead, obviously, they just collapsed at the end of the second quarter. Sabonis missed 2 straight free throws. Fox missed 4 straight free throws. Fox also missed a dunk. Monk missed a layup. Keegan missed a dunk. That was in the third quarter. I mean, the Kings left so many points on the board, and you look at the Pistons, they went 22 for 22 from the free throw line, and the Kings went 15 for 22. I mean, that's a huge difference in this game. And then the Kings, like, effort and physicality just totally fell apart on defense. The Pistons took their first lead in this entire game with 1 minute and 40 seconds to go in the second quarter, and they ended up leading by 7 points at halftime. When the Pistons started going on that run, I mean, the Kings just completely fell apart on both ends because they were taking quick, bad 3-point shots, leaving points on the board, and then they weren't getting back on defense, and they were not matching up correctly. And one big thing that I've noticed with this team is how bad this team is at defending the final seconds of a quarter. And it's always the Kings will go down, and a lot of times it'll be off free throws. In this game, it wasn't. It was just off a made basket, I think. Or maybe it was off a miss. Doesn't really matter. But at the end of the second quarter, there was 5 seconds left for the Pistons, and the Kings just didn't get back on defense. They kind of just stood around past half court, like kind of pressuring the Pistons, allowing Jaden Ivey, I think it was, or I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Ivey. It doesn't really matter. He just went straight by Herter. So then the Kings have to double on the sideline, and then they find a open Killian Hayes right at the top of the 3-point arc. The only place a pass really could have gone for an open 3. And I mean, it was still kind of a tough 3 because the time was low, but it was wide open. And I mean, that just can't happen. Like, there were 2 Pistons, maybe 3 up the entire court, and the Kings still let them get a really good shot for only having 5 seconds left. And they've done that a lot throughout the entire season, late in quarters. And then you expect the Kings to be able to regroup at halftime and come out like, okay, the Pistons just went on a run. Now we got to answer. And they don't. They just have a continuation of that run. And that's the difference between how the Kings play against runs and how they play with the momentum. Like, when they had the momentum going into the fourth quarter, they don't keep the momentum. But then when the Pistons have the momentum going into the second half, they keep that momentum. But either way, at the start of both the third and fourth quarters, in totally different scenarios, the Pistons got 3 wide open looks both times. And then just more of the Kings falling apart. Herter airballs a 3. Keegan missed a dunk. Keegan airballed a wide open 3. Again, like I mentioned before, closing out hard to Asar Thompson on the perimeter, just not staying in front of a man on defense, like overthinking things. I don't know, letting a guy in Asar Thompson go right to the rim because you're like contesting him out on the perimeter. I don't get it. There was also a moment where Sabonis, I think he thought he got fouled on one end. So he's the last one back, running back on defense because he had fallen down. And I've noticed this with him quite a bit. Like he doesn't close to the 3-point shooter because Barnes took Duren inside because Sabonis wasn't back, and Sabonis didn't close to whoever the shooter was on the wing. Instead, he's closing to the middle of the paint to try to help on Duren. And he does that a lot, and it resulted in wide open threes a lot. So he needs to close to the 3-point shooter there. It's like, oh no, they have a mismatch inside. It's like that's Barnes's problem and everyone else's, not yours. You got to close to the open shooter there. Also, the Kings didn't have an offensive rebound in the first half. Again, against a Pistons team that off the bench doesn't have a big man. They ended with 5 on the game, and offensive rebounding was a big part of how the Kings got back into the game in the third quarter. Like Huerter did an amazing job. Kevin Huerter, I mean, he was working real hard. He is not the reason we lost this game. I can tell you that. I mean, he obviously got put in a bad position having to guard Jaden Ivey. Like he did his best. I don't blame him for that. Like he just shouldn't be put in that position. But he was such a big part of the run. Him, Trey Lyles, and Sabonis, Malik Monk, like all those guys were just such a big part of the big run that the Kings went on. But Kevin Huerter was fighting on the offensive glass. He was running hard. He was sprinting back on defense, even though it didn't matter. There's just one play where he just full on sprinted to get back and get a contest off on, I think, a Marcus Sasser layup. He was also getting in the passing lanes, forced a turnover, forced a bad pass. One of his offensive rebounds, he got it out to Trey Lyles for 3. That was a big play. And Trey Lyles continued to be hot from 3, 5 for 10 from 3, 19 points against his former team, and was just super aggressive. One thing about this game is it was not the bench's fault. Trey Lyles, great. Sasha came in for 6 minutes, immediately gets fouled on a 3. He immediately picked up a foul, then got a rebound, then got fouled on a 3-point shot, made all 3 free throws. So he was just involved in everything immediately. Didn't play. I don't think he played in the second half. Definitely didn't play a lot in this game as a whole, because they just needed quicker defenders out there. Him and Lyles wasn't working against a young athletic Pistons team, at least in the starting lineup. And no JaVale, no Alex Len. Wanted to go smaller. Davion, I thought, had a really good game. Again, it sucks when there's moments, so many moments throughout a game where you're just like, they scored because he's too small there, or he had to foul there because he's too small. Like that sucks to watch. But he was driving to the rim, had two really nice takes, knocked down both of his free throws, hit a 3, was creating for others. And then you had Malik Monk, who 2 for 8 from 3, 10 for 21 from the field, but he had 23 points and 10 assists. Also had 2 blocks, and that wasn't even all his rim protection. He had some really nice rim protection moments that didn't result in blocks, but he was just absolutely dicing up the Pistons defense in the pick and roll. So that was fun to see, because I feel like we haven't seen one of those games where he just dominates in the pick and roll like he did in this one for a while. So it definitely wasn't those guys' fault that we lost. Last game, I talked about how I thought Fox's playmaking had kind of dropped off recently, and this one he came out and he seemed like he was trying to get into the lane and then kick out, and he had 7 assists to show for it. Like I could tell immediately he was definitely focused on getting into the lane and then kicking out, but maybe a little too much. Like he wasn't actually getting to the rim for himself at all. And then just the free throws with him, I mean, I don't know what's going on. Like this season has just been so bad. Harrison Barnes couldn't hit a 3. They went to him in the post a lot when he had Killian Hayes on him, and that worked pretty well. But like I felt like they just went to it a little too much, where it kind of stalled the offense a bit. And then Barnes was not good defensively at all. Not good getting around screens or rotating out to shooters. He was a big part of a lot of guys getting wide open. And then I already talked about Kevin Huerter, but he had some nice cuts, especially in transition. Like the Kings got a lot of their offense in transition, especially when they were making their big run and they were trying to push it in the fourth as well. And that worked really well, but then they just couldn't score at all in the half court. And then you had Sabonis, 30 points, 7 assists, 12 rebounds, 0 turnovers. Hit the big corner three at the buzzer at the end of the third quarter, which was really hype and would be like a really cool moment if the Kings had actually won this game. He had to play 41 minutes, and the Kings still lost. It kind of feels like lately we've gone back to rookie Keegan Murray. Not necessarily the way that he's individually performing, but in the way that the team is involving him. Like him getting pulled because he just didn't hit a few shots and was in foul trouble. Like, where did the trust go in him for him to get pulled like that? He's not getting involved as much in the offense, which I think is a problem. Like, I get Barnes as being more involved, but you have to find ways to get Keegan involved still. And he made good defensive plays. He took a charge on Ivy in transition, which is really tough to do. Like, in the open floor, took a charge. And like I said, still had really good defensive moments despite his foul trouble. And I feel like he just really could have helped down the stretch, because the Pistons, I mean, they're loose with the ball. There were plenty of times where the ball was getting knocked away. Didn't always result in turnovers, but like the ball would get knocked away, and Keegan can be a big part of that and take advantage of that. And so it's no wonder you get killed defensively when you take out your best wing defender and only play him 20 minutes and you don't have anyone who's going to come in and replace that. I mean, that's just so extremely odd to me. I just think Mike Brown got this game wrong in a lot of ways. He had a successful challenge in the first quarter, but I mean, why are you challenging that? I don't really understand. Like, sure, you won it, but now you have to be even more careful about when you use your challenge, because you could lose a timeout. And what if you lose that challenge because the refs are just being dumb? Like, you don't want to lose it in the first quarter. So again, it was successful, but I still don't really understand why he used it. Again, the Kings just, if they want to be a playoff team, you can't lose this type of game. And you can't play in as many close games as they do against bad teams. Like, that's something that the Celtics can do and the Nuggets can do. That's not something the Kings can do. It's just so disappointing. I mean, I did predict after last game in Cleveland that the Kings would lose this game and then win against Denver. And so far we're on track. But it just sucks that it's so predictable. And I'm just waiting for the Kings to take one of these games seriously and just blow the other team out. And it's just not happening. For some reason, they're just better on the road than they are at home. The trade deadline's tomorrow, so we'll see if a move is made. I'm guessing some move will be made. Probably not a big one. I want, give me Royce O'Neal. Give me some wing defender. But I'll definitely make a video tomorrow for whether the Kings make a move or not. Like, it doesn't matter. I'll be talking about it, because if the Kings don't make a move, then that's still something to talk about. But then on Friday, it is Denver. And I mean, it's a tough schedule still coming up, and it's very road heavy, which normally I'd be like, oh no, it's road heavy. But honestly, the Kings just don't play well in front of the Golden One crowd. Like, I don't know what it is. I mean, the crowd was ready to go from the jump against a team with 6 wins. And you still can't come out and play with enough focus to beat a team like that at home. I just don't get it. If this was a one-off thing, then sure, but it's not. The Kings have played pretty poorly at home going back to last season. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back tomorrow to talk about the trade deadline, so I will see you guys then. Peace.